everyone, my name is Katya and this is Art of the Week with Katya, continued. 3 years ago I used to do this vlog on art historic monuments that were very important, very central to the city of Bologna that I was studying abroad in at the time. Some of you may remember my videos from the past, from 3 years ago. And I have decided to continue this vlog following the same two principles that I followed before, that these will be very light and small videos, 5 minutes tops, on various lesser known art historic monuments. So without further ado, let's get started on our very first video. So I am here in Piazza San Marco in the center of Venice, where I currently am, and I'm here with these two columns, right next to the Church of San Marco itself is right back there. That's the Church of San Marco. And these two columns are very interesting because they are obviously made of very different pieces of marble that were decorated in different eras. So we can see this piece up here is very ornate. It's covered in in the grapes, in the tree of life type of very symmetrical and yet very natural symbology. And then down here we have a symbol that is much more, it's a little bit more stark in contrast. It's much more purified, one could say, in contrast. And we know this because these are very interesting examples of Byzantine art in the early Middle Ages. Now, so there were a lot of people here during the early Middle Ages on the island of Venice, and it's a little bit hard to explain exactly what the truth was, because there is a founding myth of Venice that is very strong. It's been told for many years. We have found out recently, archaeologically speaking, this myth isn't entirely true. But what we do know is that the Byzantines, where this art comes from explicitly, were definitely here. They were here on the islands of Venice and Torcello long into the 1000s. Now see, at this time in the early Middle Ages, there was an erosion of the same empire, which had been split in half, and now so we're talking about the Eastern Byzantine Empire. The seat of the emperor was in Constantinople, modern-day Istanbul, and the Byzantines, the Eastern Byzantines at this point, were being slowly eroded from the mainland because of all the different Goths who were showing up, the Lombards, the Carolingians, lots of different people from the north were coming down. But we know, like I said, that they stayed here well into the 1000s, and this is one of the ways that we know. These are one of the pieces of marble that we can see potentially reused, potentially resculpted over time. And we can see the stark contrast here is mainly due to the big event that happened in the Eastern Byzantine Empire in the 8th and in most of the 8th century and in the beginning of the 9th century, which also coincides to archaeological findings of the founding of Venice, is around the early 9th century, which was Iconoclasm. This was a major period of iconoclasm that started under the Emperor Leo III. Now there's many reasons as to why we think this happened. There's a lot of discourses in art history as to why. Basically, the Byzantine Empire, it was a socio-political, religious phenomena, also cultural, also of identity. It was a moment where the Eastern Byzantine Empire from the west, Western Christianity was changing drastically with all these Goths coming down, and there was a big fight, in fact, between the Pope at the time and the Emperor. And this was a way for the Emperor, in a way, to help establish what was Eastern Byzantine identity. Meanwhile, in the southeast of the Eastern Byzantine Empire, we have the birth of Islam has happened very recently in the preceding centuries during this time. And as a result, we have this moment of identity crisis, basically, for the Eastern Byzantines. They're not really sure how they want to establish their church, their Christianity, and therefore their identity. Now, this was also a heavily political and military phenomena, but what's interesting is because the politics of Eastern Byzantium were very much tied to the church. We see the reflections of those politics happening on church objects, such as these columns. The iconoclasm is happening while the remains of San Marco and the first church of St. Mark's is being built here in Venice. The Byzantines are here under the Patriarchate of Grado, so they're in the church, they have military bases here, which is why we can see so predominantly that iconoclasm and the reflections of that movement definitely happen here. And the iconoclasts believed very strongly that, moreover, that the symbology had to be made a part of the earthly, and it had to be it had to show a real purification of symbology that could not be figurative, could not show earthly at all. It was supposed to reflect the original points of Christianity as much as possible. So here we can see the symbology of the Garden of Eden, very vegetal symbology, also the swirls showing the tree of life. These are symbols that we see on sarcophagi. And these are also symbols that we see on sarcophagi, but it's strikingly different because here we have just the cross, just the symbol, very strikingly telling us of paradise, but in a very, very starkingly symbolic way that is showing us, telling us a bit of the story of iconoclasm before what happens and during what happens. After what happens, it's even more complex. Stay tuned for the next episode of Art of the Week with Katya. See you soon!